Hey everyone! When I put up my video about tips for how to choose a Pitch Wars mentor, I had asked what other topics y'all wanted me to cover, and queries was the most requested topic. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some query tips that I have to make your queries stand out in the slush pile, whether you're participating on Pitch Wars or you're just querying agents in general, or publishers even. So if you are just stumbling on this and you don't know what Pitch Wars is, you can go to pitchwars.org. Also, if you're stumbling on this and you don't know what a query is, I definitely recommend just like Googling what is a query, and you'll find a whole bunch of information on that. But I want to focus here on taking your query to the next level to make sure that agents and mentors and whoever is going to be reading it are going to be intrigued by your query. So all of this advice is things that I have developed. I used to read Slush for a publisher, and then I was a Pitch Wars mentor for 5 years. So I read hundreds and hundreds of queries every year for 5 years. And that's where I've developed a lot of these tips. So let's get to it. My first tip can sometimes be really hard to master, but that is infusing voice in your query, especially if your book is voicey itself. You want to make sure some of that voice comes through in the query. Now you want to do this in a way that does justice to your book, but without coming across as gimmicky or just weird. This doesn't have to be like an all-out thing, but a few well-chosen words can really breathe some life into your query. So for example, in my query for Dragons Are People Too, I mentioned that the president asked Kitty, my main character, to do something for her, and what the query says is the president has the balls to ask her blah blah blah. And so if you have read Dragons Are People Too, you know that that is definitely a way that Kitty would phrase that sentence. So that's just like a small little tweak that I added to add voice into the query. Another thing is that your main character must act in the query. You must have sentences and phrasing that shows that your main character is the one driving the plot forward through their actions. In your book, of course, your main character should drive the story forward, so this needs to be reflected in your query, because if your character is seen as a passenger in their own story, then that's going to make the mentor or the agent think that the main character is passive. And so a lot of times you'll see queries where something happens to the main character, or the main character is forced to do such and such. And if all the sentences in your query are that, where your main character is not actually making a decision at any point and driving the story forward at any point, that's going to read weak as a weak character to the reader. You want to use strong and specific verbs in your sentences. So what I recommend is you take out all the verbs in your query and you put them in a separate document and look at them on their own. And if you have any verbs, well, to be verbs especially, but if you have any verbs that just seem boring or uninspired to you, see if you can find a stronger and more specific version of that verb that fits your story. Now, you don't want to do this to all the verbs in your query because it might read a little weird, but if you could try to make those maybe 25 to 50% stronger and more specific, this is going to make your query stronger and more specific. So one example that I did recently was there was a query that said something gives him power, right? And so what I had changed it to was a high fantasy, and so this fits well with the tone, is I said that this thing imbues him with power. So that's an example of a stronger and more specific verb that makes it a little more exciting. Another example for this is if you say that your main character finds out the truth. Now you can rearrange that and you could say that your main character uncovers the truth, because that's a little bit more exciting and it's a little bit more active, and it makes it seem like your main character was more active in that process, because finds out means like someone could have told them that, whereas uncovers means they actively pursued that truth. You also want to cut the cliches. So his world will never be the same again. She must make the most difficult decision of her life. He gets more than he bargained for. So these are phrases that could describe or have appeared in descriptions for like thousands of books. And so you want to try to take those phrases and make it more specific. A good rule of thumb is if you've ever heard this phrase or this sentence used to describe a book or movie, try to see if you can rewrite it to make it more specific to your book. Now you probably won't be able to do this with every sentence that you find has been used in another description, but you can do it with most of them, and it will definitely go far in improving the conciseness and the excitement in your query. So the two big things, and these are the things whenever I teach classes on queries, are conflict and stakes. And so I always ask these 4 questions. Who is your main character? What do they want? That's their motivation. What stands in the way of getting what they want? That's the conflict. And what happens if they don't get what they want? Those are the stakes. So if your query doesn't answer those 4 questions, you probably need to go back and kind of start all over again to make sure you're answering those questions in your query. Another tip is not necessary for all people, but I feel like some people need to hear this, and that is to keep your ego in check. Chip McGregor was talking the other day about a query that he received that included the phrase, and I'm going to read this so you don't think I'm making this up at all. This is the most important book that can ever be written for the benefit of everyone. Now, obviously, most of them aren't going to be that bad, but you do see lines and queries like this that are very similar, maybe not quite as ridiculous though. So one of the ways that this happens though is in using comp titles that are huge. So if you're using like Harry Potter as a comp title, that just tells the agent that you either A, have unrealistic expectations in your book, or B, whatever, you haven't read widely in your genre and you don't know anything else to compare it to. And either way, that's going to be a red flag for the agent. Another way that this happens is sometimes people will make a statement about how all the other books in this category or genre are terrible, but mine is so much better. And that's the same thing. One, it just makes it seem like you have a huge ego and are going to be difficult to work with. Now remember, if we're talking about mentorship or agenting, we're talking about a close one-on-one long-term relationship. And so if someone seems like they're going to be difficult to work with, that's going to be a no for most people. The other thing is it makes it seem like either you haven't read widely in your genre, which is a common theme here, or you don't have any respect for the category or genre that you're writing in. And either way, that is a signal to the agent or the mentor that you may not know very much about the market that you're writing in. So another thing that you want to do is raise questions, but without asking them. So we all know that rhetorical questions are a big no-no in queries, right? Like, we do know that, right? Okay. So no rhetorical questions. If you have those, make sure you just go ahead and pause this video right now and go take that out of your query, because that is a big no-no. But what you want to do is you want to phrase things in a way that the reader is then asking themselves questions that you don't have to ask on the page. So I'm going to give you an example from the query letter for my book, Dragons Are People Too. And I'm going to read this sentence. Kitty soon discovers that no one's loyalties lay where they should, or at least where she wants them to. And so what I'm hoping with that sentence is to convince the reader to ask themselves the questions: who betrays Kitty? Why do they betray Kitty? And why is where loyalties should lie different from where she wants them to lie? What's the conflict there? And so obviously your goal here is the only way that an agent can get these questions answered for themselves is to read the book. So in summary, you want to guide the reader towards asking those questions themselves rather than you posing that question on the page. So another query tip that I have for you is to emulate the greats. So go into a bookstore or go to online retailers and read the back cover copy for books that might be considered either competition to yours or comparable to your book. And you want to read and find maybe like 5 that you think are really compelling, that did a great job of drawing you in, and make sure they're also books that sold reasonably well as well. And you want to take a look at what they did. What you really want to look at here is word choice, tone, sentence structure. Really dig down deep and evaluate those and try to see why they brought you in, what they did that helped to capture your attention. And then you're going to want to copy those techniques when you're talking about your own story. The last tip that I want to provide to you before I go into a list of things you should definitely not have in your query is that the most important thing is to remember the purpose of the query. And the sole purpose, the only purpose of a query is to convince the agent or mentor or whoever that they want to read more. I feel like a lot of people really get bogged down in the rules and the do's and the don'ts and where should I put my bio, where should I put my info. But all of that doesn't matter if the query makes the agent want to read more. That is the most important thing, and that is the thing that you should focus on the most. Now, I wanted to give you a list of things that you should definitely omit, leave out, remove from your query. And I'm going to try to get through these quick, but some of them may need a little explanation. Subplots or characters that don't move the story forward in any way. You also want to remove any concepts or words that may slow the reader down. So for example, instead of saying something like whatever the name of your complicated time travel device, you're just going to want to say time travel device and not make the reader stop and try to figure out what this word is that you're saying. You want to remove exclamation points as much as possible. You also want to make sure you're not using the phrase fiction novel at any point, because a novel is by definition fiction. So that's just like a big newbie red flag. I know for some people it may feel natural to put in self-deprecation into their query, but you don't want to do this, because what you're doing is you are signaling to the agent or editor that you're not confident in your book. And if you're not confident in your book, then how are you going to expect them to have any confidence when they're reading the query? Also, you don't want to get them in that mindset of like, there's something wrong with this book before they even start reading it. So just take that out. It doesn't help you, I promise. You also want to take out any irrelevant personal information. I know it feels like you have to include a bio paragraph in your query, but if you don't have any information that's relevant to your ability or your dedication to writing and publishing a book, feel free to leave it out entirely. That is totally fine. For fiction, the number one most important thing is the book. The platform does not matter. That may be different for nonfiction, but for fiction, it really is not a huge deal if you don't have anything to put in that bio paragraph. But if you do want to put something in there and you're a member of like SCBWI or a local writing organization or something like that, that's a great thing to include in there. Unless the book is about politics or religion, there is no need to mention politics or religion in your query. There is no reason to mention your age in a query. It won't help you, and all it can do possibly is create a subconscious bias. There is no need to make comments about the state of the industry or the market, because there are only 2 possible outcomes to this. One, you're wrong and the agent's going to be like, they don't know what they're talking about. Or 2, you're right and the agent already knows it, so you're just telling them something they already know. I always lean on the side of avoiding jokes, because you never know how those jokes are going to land. So especially if your book is not a humor book, just go ahead and leave those jokes completely out. It's totally fine to leave that for later in the relationship. You definitely don't want to include any personal information about the agent or any comments on their personal appearance. This just comes across as kind of creepy, so just don't put that in there at all. There's no need to comment on how long it took you to write the book or that this is your first book. The agent does not need to know that in order to make a decision on the fiction itself. You don't want to include any editorializing statements. So an editorializing statement is one that a reviewer might write about your book. So anything that's like, oh, this is a fast-paced thrill ride, things like that, that's an editorializing statement. And the reason for this is you don't want to tell an agent what your book is. You want to show them through your query and through your first page what kind of book this is, and let them form that opinion for themselves, because opinions that people form for themselves rather than opinions that have been told to them by other people are more strongly held. Don't include any attachments unless specifically asked. In a lot of cases, this is actually going to get you sent straight to the spam inbox. The phrase, "There is nothing like this on the market." Every time I've seen this in a query, I could probably name 10 books that are very similar to it on the current market. This is almost never ever a true statement, and what it does is it shows that you haven't done your market research at all. And unless it is true, in which case honestly it may not be publishable if there's absolutely nothing like it on the market. There's no reason to say that your friends and family members read the book and liked it. I hope they did, because they're your friends, so I hope they're liking what you're doing. But I don't know them, so I don't know if their opinion is someone's opinion that I'm gonna want to take. And also, it just doesn't mean anything at all, so leave it out. You definitely don't want to put down agents in general, or a specific agent, or publishing in general in your query letter. And you do see this sometimes, and I have to question the intelligence of this, because if you are putting down agents or you're putting down publishing, then why are you pursuing traditional publishing? I understand that it's a frustrating process for a lot of people, but it's the best process that we have right now, so there's no reason to inject that negativity into your query. The phrase, "it doesn't really fit into a genre." The problem is, if your book is sold in the traditional publishing market, it is going to need to go onto a genre bookshelf somewhere. So it's going to have to fit somewhat in a genre. But the problem though is that most of the times I've seen this in a query is it fits perfectly into a genre. Definitely do not include any first person POV from your character's point of view. This is a big no-no. Don't include the words trend and diversity in the same sentence, because diversity is not a trend. It is just a fact of life that we are finally realizing we want to reflect in published books. And in this vein, the one thing that's really frustrating to me is the phrase LGBT novel, because unless your book features a lesbian character, a gay character, a bisexual character, and a trans character, it is not an LGBT novel. It may be a lesbian novel, it may be a trans novel, but it is not all of the above usually. So don't use that phrase because it is not specific enough. Thank you all so much for watching my video. I hope that you found something in here helpful, and if you did, please don't forget to like and comment and subscribe. I do have a new project that I'm launching in October I'm very excited about, so if you want to get information about that whenever it becomes available, make sure you subscribe to my channel. And thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Hi everyone, I am in a different shirt, in a different room, in a different city, on a different day, but I was editing my query tip video and I decided that I wanted to do a query critique giveaway. So if you would like to enter that query critique giveaway, just comment down below saying you'd like to enter it, and make sure you subscribe to my channel, and I will choose one person at random at the end of the day on Thursday. So you just have a couple days to enter, and then I'll get that critique to you by the end of the weekend. Now, you don't have to be entering Pitch Wars in order to enter my critique giveaway. It's totally fine if you're not entering Pitch Wars. My specialties are young adult and middle grade fiction, and also commercial fiction in the adult category as well. So things like mystery, science fiction, fantasy, thriller, romance, those are my specialties. So if you have like a literary novel, I might not be too much of a help, but if you want to enter, then I can try, but I just wanted to put that out right in front.